Welcome back to Levant TV's press review in this Mideast In-Depth section, where we usually feature a piece on top stories and talk to an expert to tell us more. Global Fellow at the Wilson Center in Washington, D.C. and a Professor of International Relations at Sabancı University in Istanbul, Bulent Aras writes for the Lebanese Daily Star a column titled, "Syria Shows the Limits of Rouhani's Charm Offensive." Aras starts by a bold statement that Rouhani's charm offensive has stalled. It worked well at the UN Assembly in September when he had something solid to offer, a deal on his country's nuclear program, raising hopes that Iran's hardline foreign policy stance would finally soften. But UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon's withdrawal of Iran's invitation to the Geneva II conference on Syria suggests that Rouhani will need more than charm or even a visit by Turkish Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan to end his country's isolation. Aras says the nuclear agreement is likely to be Iran's most important diplomatic achievement since the Islamic Revolution in 1979, providing it with considerable relief both domestically and internationally. And the fact that Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei personally backed the effort makes it all the more promising. Nonetheless, the regime's possible rapprochement with the United States remains a source of concern in the Middle East because a possible rapprochement would empower Iran at a time when the US is gradually disengaging from the region. And as per Aras, the question now is whether Rouhani's moderation towards the West will be accompanied by a change in Iran's Middle East policy, with all eyes on its policy on Syria. First, Ban Ki-moon rescinded Iran's invitation to Geneva II under pressure from the US and the Syrian opposition. And second, Iran has provided essential financial and military support to Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's regime, while mobilizing its Lebanese proxy Hezbollah to fight against the rebels in Syria. Iran is also undoubtedly part of the Syrian equation. Its involvement is critical to reaching any accords. And finally, as per the writer, Rouhani's failure to make a decisive statement on Syria with regards to mass torture and similar issues has not helped the case for keeping Iran in the fold. In Davos, the article adds, the world expected a decisive statement on Syria and other regional problems. Rouhani must have known that refraining from addressing the humanitarian disaster in Syria would damage his diplomatic strategy, which suggests that he must have a strong reason. The writer concludes saying two possibilities stand out. A, either there is no consensus within the Iranian elite for a policy change, or the elite remains united in their determination to continue backing President Assad, and neither alternative is particularly charming, which would explain why he preferred to obscure his country's position. The writer says in refusing to take a strong position on Syria, Rouhani, like so many other world leaders, is placing his own interests above those of the 2.3 million registered Syrian refugees, the millions more who have been internally displaced, the estimated 130,000 people killed, and the rest of Syria's long-suffering population. And finally, Bulent Aras says what Syria needs today is not rhetoric or charisma, it needs action. Iran appears incapable of providing it. This is why Rouhani's charm offensive will not be enough to persuade Iran's adversaries that Tehran is ready to come in from the cold. And joining us today is researcher on Middle East affairs at King's College in London, Raphael. Thank you very much for joining us today at such very short notice.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Raphael, looking back at the Daily Star article by Bulent Aras, one can't but stop on some points. First, in your opinion, do you think President Rouhani's remarks on the catastrophic outcome of the Syrian crisis at Davos means that Iran denies its involvement in peace talks, as the writer put it?
Well, I'd say his comments in Davos don't really correlate to the quote-unquote charm offensive that Iran has been waging regarding its nuclear issue. I think there's almost a false tendency amongst analysts in the West to conflate the charm offensive regarding the nuclear issue and the Syrian issue, when it seems that from the Iranian perspective, the two issues are not necessarily inextricably linked. You have, at least what appears to be flexibility on the nuclear file, but you haven't really seen regarding actions or words a sort of flexibility or compromise regarding the Syrian issue, most clearly evident in their rejection of the baseline parameters of the Geneva II Convention.
Mm-hmm. And also the writer never spoke about Israel's stance in the post-deal period. And does charm, do you think, does it need to emerge only from the Iranian side?
Well, I think Israel has made a concerted effort regarding the Syrian issue to really remain quite quiet overall. I mean, sure, there have been these alleged air operations, but overall the rhetoric and military action has been very careful and very calibrated regarding any involvement in Syria. On the nuclear issue, there's no doubt that statements from certain ministers within Israel could be helpful for them to sort of moderate their certain stances regarding the threat of nuclear force. But you do have some more promising comments coming from more moderate leaders like Shimon Peres and others who welcome the Iranian initiative as long as there are verifiable action that Iran has taken. I mean, the primary concern is that of Israel regarding the nuclear deal is that it will be words rather than actual nuclear disarmament. Simple facade of words. But there's no doubt that amelioration between of the rhetoric from Israel could perhaps build confidence in Iranian leaders.
Mm-hmm. And speaking about the moderate leaders like Shimon Peres in Israel, do you think they're less perhaps offended about the deal because they realize that it is an interim deal, while, for instance, leaders like Prime Minister Netanyahu maybe did not really look at the interim aspect of the deal, because we all know it's only a 6-month interim deal. So do you think they exaggerated their reaction? I'm talking about the right wing in Israel.
No, I think your assessment is correct. The right wing in Israel did sort of up their rhetoric and increase the aggressiveness of the rhetoric to the 6-month deal, despite the well-known fact that this is, like you said, a 6-month interim deal. I mean, interestingly, you have a lot of talk coming from retired Israeli military officials, notably the former head of military intelligence and others, who have come out quite strongly in favor of the interim deal on the pretext that it is what it says it is, a 6-month interim deal. If this interim deal were to resemble a final deal, it would be a quote-unquote bad deal from the Israeli perspective. Mm-hmm. But I think that if for a nuanced analysis from the Israeli perspective, assuming that there is verifiability of Iranian action, which I think the U.S. has given full guarantees to Israel that would be the case, the interim deal isn't really a quote bad deal for Israel. I mean, keep in mind also this is not just Israel v. Iran. This is a Western or European /American effort, with Israel being only one small partner of a wider dialogue.
Yes. And back to Davos and the expectations from Iran, as the writer said that this time Iran didn't really show much charm there compared to what it did in September in Geneva. Now, while Iran does not deny its support of the Syrian regime, obviously it's no secret that they do support the Syrian regime. It is a strategic alliance that is part of the world's balance of powers in a post-imperialist era. So why do you think the writer thought that they should compromise on this alliance with Syria so that they really prove that they are complying with what the West is expecting from them?
I mean, I think it's in a way it's a case of wishful thinking that because Iran has illustrated, at least with its rhetoric, a sort of flexibility on the nuclear issue, that it will all of a sudden, quote unquote, fall into line or alter its foreign policy to fit what the West would ideally like. That it will really become a responsible world player. I mean, I don't think that is going to be the case. I think that this is a very calculated decision made by the leadership in Iran, that partially due to sanctions and partially due to internal factors, that Khamenei has given apparently his support for nuclear compromise. There hasn't been any indication that anyone in Iran was willing to compromise the relationship with Syria or Hezbollah at this time. I mean, just one interesting, just even today, there was comments from Ali Akbar Salehi, from the Iranian nuclear organization, that
yes.
to ameliorate Western concerns about the Arak heavy water facility, that they would take, I think was quoted as unspecified changes to Arak to sort of alleviate concerns within the West. I mean, this to me is a very clear sign that they are willing, at least superficially, to play ball, or to engage the West on the nuclear file. But like I said, for Syria, I don't think there is absolutely no indication that they've been willing to illustrate any flexibility, because I think inherently Iran separates the two issues. From the Western perspective, we would like the nuclear issue and the Syria issue and their support for Hezbollah and their meddling in Iraq to, for them to address the concerns of the West in all these issues. But I don't think Iran has ever indicated that they're really gonna follow through on that.
Yes. And finally, Raphael, the article failed to mention other forms of foreign involvement in the Syrian crisis. They did mention Iran supporting, through its proxy, Hezbollah supporting the regime in the battles in Syria, yet they never mention, namely, Saudi and Qatari funding of rebel factions associated with terrorist activities. Yet, there are high expectations on Iran, but the article never tackles issues of foreign support and foreign fuelings of the battles, like I said, from Qatar and Saudi Arabia. So what do you think of that?
I mean, I think there's no doubt there is a sort of double standard in that regard. I mean, the Saudi and Qatari efforts are not helpful towards coming to a peaceful resolution as part of Geneva II. You have, unconfirmed reports that Saudi and Qatari funds are going to Islamist groups, even to some jihadist groups, and there's no doubt that this is not helpful. This has gone what, at least overtly, is contravention to what the United States and the other powers in the Geneva II conference would like to see. But if as a sort of deal, that Saudi Arabia and Qatar would cease their support for some of these groups, I mean, do we think that Iran would agree to cease support for Hezbollah in Syria? I mean, I'm not sure that would go in parallel. But there's no doubt that the Saudi and Qatari aid is another factor exacerbating the devastation of Syria.
Yes, for sure. We'll leave the viewers to decide what would happen in such a possible scenario. That was Raphael Marcos, researcher at King's College. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Raphael is also focused on Middle East security, insurgency and asymmetric warfare and the Arab-Israeli conflict. And for more updates, visit us on levant.tv. Thanks for watching and bye for now.